cognizant of that this whole time. It has been a topic of conversation at every single one of our meetings. I would guess we probably met for a total of about 12 to 15 hours, somewhere in there, and tried our best to answer some of these things. We don't have all the answers, or some of the things that are going to have to be decided by the board. Hourly employees such as custodians could go ahead and work their 40-day week on Fridays without people in the building. They would, I mean, I've talked to my head custodian, and it's like, it's great when we're here and people are not, because we get a lot done. We have talked with Donna Bott, who's the transportation director, Patty Esser, who is in charge of food services. We've kept in mind our EAs. They will be able to work on those Fridays. But one of the things is we will offer those opportunities to for them to work, or other districts have made the decision, because we won't, our budget is not going to change because if we change calendars, our budget will be the same. So the board, and that would be their decision, could always just choose to hold employees whole, which means they would, there's a number of ways that you could do that. You could raise their hourly rate so that they're making similar amount per month as they are right now. There's lots of ways to do that. So we've tried to keep all of those people in mind. Transportation director told us she has plenty for the bus drivers to do with the extra activities on Fridays. We would run limited bus routes, training, all that kind of stuff that she could do with the bus drivers on those days. Food service, Patty had talked about prepping meals, doing paperwork, all those kinds of things on Friday for those people to try to get them some extra hours. So those are some of the things that we thought about when we looked at the 4-day calendar. As you can see in the informational packet, we talked to schools from multiple states: Colorado, Nebraska, Wyoming, Texas. I can't remember them all. A lot of them, to try and see different ways of how school districts have done these calendars. Our goal is to put kids and teachers in the room at the same time as much as possible. So it would be on the athletic directors to schedule as few events on school nights as absolutely possible. It would need to be on Fridays and Saturdays. That's not always, it can't always happen, but that would be the expectation as much as is possible. We are starting to lose teaching candidates to districts with 4-day calendars. Corey was trying to hire a position this year and get 4 candidates, and 2 of them turned him down because they went to a district with 4-day calendar. So we are starting to see that. We have lost teachers, especially the lot, who went up there because of a 4-day calendar. Our teachers need time to work. We've added a lot to their plates over the year. I'm not sure we've ever really taken much off, and we've given them less time to do it. So there is that need for work. I'll just give you an example. My wife teaches kindergarten at Southeast. Gordon Gillingham, OG, is one of our new literacy programs. There's a class called Letters that goes along with it. Gordon Gillingham is the what? Letters is the why. All of the teachers that are taking it will tell you it's one of the best classes they've ever taken. It's approximately 250 hours outside of the classroom on their own. So there is a major need for time to work. There's a major need for specific time for interventions with those small groups for kids that are struggling. We need that back. So those were some of our goals. So we'll flip over to what we call the balanced option. We looked at a variety of calendars. Honestly, we looked at traditional year-round. We looked at the 4-day. We looked at a 165-day calendar, and then we looked at this one. And we just called it the balanced option. It has a couple of added big breaks, one after the first quarter, one after the third quarter. That first week of those breaks, students that need intervention would come in. We would use summer school money, summer school money to pay teachers to work with kids during that time, so that we could do some of those interventions and credit recovery and catching kids up early in the year instead of waiting for summer school at the end of the year. We would do that after the first and third quarter. If you need those interventions, you would come in during that time. If you don't need them, you get a long fall break and you get a long spring break. Teachers and kids would be out the second week of those breaks. We have a lot more families that are going on vacation during the year. Not everybody's job allows for them to go on vacation during the summer, so a lot of families have started taking vacations during the year. We've had kids go to Puerto Rico, Mexico, California, all over the place this year. During the fall, we had a lot of kids miss 5 to 10 days to go hunting. So this gives them some of those breaks where they can do some of those things during the year and maybe build it in so that the kids aren't missing school. This is a 175-day calendar, just like we do now. So this one would not need state approval. The other one would need state approval. We were cognizant of state fair. I think 4, 5, 6 years ago, whenever we talked about this last, we looked at one that would have interfered with state fair. That was widely unpopular, so we avoided state fair for kids. Teachers would be doing their in-services during that time. Last day of school would be on the 7th of June. We understand that's after Memorial Day, and generally we have not gone after Memorial Day, but to get those breaks in and allow for those opportunities for teachers and students, we would need those. We would need a little bit longer time. If you look at those breaks, also the first 2 days are mandatory teacher work days where everybody would come in and work. They wouldn't get the summer school money to do that. So we're just trying to think outside of the box. We've done the same thing for a lot of years. We're trying to figure out a way to provide the time for both teachers and students, especially the students that need interventions, to get what they need. And so on the balanced option, staff hours wouldn't change. Currently, staff works 1,387 and a half hours per year. That's 185 7.5 hour days. On the 152-day calendar, we would get as close to that as possible. If you go 8 to 4 and then you go 7:45 to 1 on Fridays, it gets us like at 1360-ish. I can't remember, 1370s, somewhere in there. So Lorene went through and figured all the hours for us, but it gets us very, very close. We do not want to go through and renegotiate salaries and all the pay scales and all that kind of stuff. So we will make it once a decision is made and further guidance is given. I know it's 152 right now. Board could say we want 155. They could, I mean, they're in charge of this when they vote. So we could do different things to get more hours. We could get it right at. I mean, this is a draft. This is not set in concrete. They voted in. We're not for sure going just boom right there. There's our calendar. So these guys up here on the stage would be in charge of that. So okay. And then part of the state requirement is that every 2 years we revisit this. They send out a survey, take parent input. For example, Pine Bluffs Burns, who's been on this for 4 or 6 years, I can't remember. They just had to do theirs this year. So they sent out a 1-question survey. Do you want the 4 days a week to stay? Do you not? 96% of their parents said yes, we wanted to stay. So that was all that's really required. All right, thank you.
Okay, now we'll be to letter B, which is the hearing portion of this. This is the first of 2 opportunities for the public to provide input and comments on proposed calendars. The next hearing is scheduled for Thursday, February 9th, once again. And with that, I'll turn it over to you guys for questions. Right now, I have Joshua Kruger.
Hi, thank you, board and staff. Once again, my name is Joshua Kruger. I appreciate this opportunity. I have some questions that hopefully can be answered. In a previous meeting, I heard that the proposed calendars may involve a trimester. I'm not sure if that's still with these, the packet doesn't really say. If it does involve a trimester, my concern comes with high school students that are taking college classes up at the college. The college works on a semester. So if we enact a trimester, there's going to be gaps in the high school students that are taking college classes up at the college where schedules don't fit properly. So I'm just wondering, has that been thought about? Like I said, I'm not sure if we're still looking at trimesters or not.
We'll have a discussion related to trimesters following this. They can either have a trimester related to this calendar or on a traditional calendar. That conversation at a later time.
Okay. What I know that there's a huge push because of sports that are involved here. But even if you look at current sports calendar this year, the current Goshen calendar, there's a lot that's even tonight, looking next week, that are not scheduled on Fridays. There are some schools, obviously, that are on the 4-day calendar already, and maybe you can coordinate with them for Fridays and Saturdays. But what about the other schools that are more on a traditional schedule? Are we going to be able to coordinate with them on a Friday and Saturday so that we get all of the sports events on those days? This is kind of a question on that.
Sorry, Josh, I apologize. I didn't know how Chairman Sussich would like us to proceed. Just if you want, if you would you prefer to answer that question or wait, what would you prefer?
Well, I'll go ahead and let you guys answer that.
Okay, sounds good. I can wait for the other ones. I think Mr. Williams referenced that earlier when he said that that would be put on the EDs to try as much as possible. Obviously, like you referenced, there may be times in which there is an imperfect balance, which that might not be possible. There's opportunities also if we have Southeast of Ringo that there is reduced travel time, and so Thursday or Tuesday night games are not out of the question on those short travel times. Mr. Williams or Mr. Goodrich, good as add to that answer.
So right now, Southeast and Lingo, we're in the CWAC conference. We're the only teams in that conference that are on traditional calendar. So it's actually affecting us the other way. We're being asked to start, like especially junior high quads. We've gone to playing to reduce travel and time out of the classroom. 4 teams show up at the same place at the same time and play 2 games. We've actually been asked to start at 10 a.m. right for those because like so we've asked them to postpone it until 1 and they have been gracious enough to do that. With Torrington, not like Glen Rock is, Douglas is looking at it. Some of those other teams, it's up to the teams to schedule that as much as possible. That would be the expectation.
Well, I know there's several sports events that may encompass several days, and that's one of the concern. And I'm still a little confused how if we went a 4-day, looks like we're extending the day by about 15 minutes on the day. And I don't know how, if I'm wrong, you guys can correct me, how 4 days, 15 minutes, that's an hour, how we make up a half a day with 1 hour through the 4 days.
So actually, we far exceed right now state requirements in regards to contact time. So that would be the reason, because I believe it was prior to 4 years ago when we went from an earlier dismissal to a later dismissal, which actually also pushed us even further beyond the required time. Williams, would you go through that?
What we proposed in that calendar, and depending on when they were in, if it's 3:55, 4 o'clock, it'd be 20 or 25 minutes longer. And based on the numbers we put out, for 152, it'd be very close to identical student numbers.
And last question, I mean, this is on your guys' proposal. So it says the committee was formed as part of an agreement made at salary negotiations in May of 2022. So I'm wondering if the focus is more on teachers or what is best for our students. And I see that I'm about out of time, so I'll let you guys answer that.
And Josh, if you want to say, I think a lot of your time and we had other questions, so that's why I mean, it's especially there, and I appreciate you, but I want to answer that one also. Yes, it actually was part of salary relations. It is part of the staff checking, because I think as Mr. Williams referenced, our Friday afternoons, by moving those off the alternate dates, It ended up, rising something out, but I'll keep going here in a moment. We're also gonna get money from Mr. Williams, Mr. Gilchrist, something anybody else has additional questions, we're getting that together, so thank you, Brian. So that's one of the aspects of salary relations that we wanted to address because of that Friday afternoon piece. That is important. The student piece also is important because if you look at the attendance rates from those Fridays, there is a significant downturn in those. And so we want to make it as efficient as possible. One of the largest things, one of the most challenging things I've had as a principal superintendent, teachers regularly, one of the main things that they tell me when I ask, what can I do to help? What can I do to make a difference for you as a teacher? Number one answer all the time is time. It is more time. I need more time to do this. And really what you look at is I have struggled over the years. I even started earlier this year on answering that question. How can we get teachers more time? Because we know the time in the classroom, if it is impacted by extreme high quality lessons and high quality engaging activities, that range from your students who are in special education to your highest level learners. If we can engage students, even if it's for 40 minutes at a time, the difference between a highly engaging lesson and the learning that can be had in that time versus time that all that instructor had to do was be able to teach that middle, because that's all they could do, because I have teachers regularly at 10:30. You're working on things regularly. Friday night, we go out to dinner. I'm sitting there at dinner, and at 7:45, the kindergarten teacher walks in. She came directly from her classroom. It is absolutely necessary that we address in some way, shape, or form what we can do for staff to have an impact on what we can do for kids. Because when you are spending that much time, your lessons you're teaching to that middle, and we need, because of that range, because of those kids, every single classroom, from that special education to that extremely high achiever, we need engaging, active lessons. And the difference between a 40-minute high quality lesson and a 40-minute lesson that's just off the middle is dramatic. It's not just about time. And I think we always talk about that if we have a really, really high quality coach, and we talk about going to different activities and things, or spending that time with a high quality instructor or high quality lessons for someone in fine arts or band or any of those activities, if they're working with somebody with the highest quality versus someone who might be extremely less knowledgeable like myself, that difference is so dramatic. It's not necessarily about that face time. It's about the high quality lessons we can provide. But it's a great question.
Like I said, I just wanted to check because, and like I said, the high school, college, because I know that's what a lot of our high school students are pursuing, and it's a great avenue. So I hope that we encompass that and realize that that's a big concern. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I have no other goldenrod sheets in front of me. Does anybody have one that they wish to bring up, or if you want to get up and speak, now's the time. Okay.
My name is Mandy Blumkert. Most of my questions are just about the 4-day calendar, just because of the time differences. My big concern is for the little guys, I already think our day is a little bit long, for the little guys. And I've got one who will be starting kindergarten either next year or the year after. And I know kindergartners, they always come home and they're ready for bed. And so I know making that day even 15 minutes longer is going to be a killer on those little guys. So that's my big concern and I was wondering if maybe there's a chance that at least for the younger grades, that we could, because I know the requirements for hours are lower for those younger grades. So I wondered if there was a way to allot for that need for them in that calendar by adjusting times that way for them. So just food for thought for the calendar committee that way. And also, I'm a little concerned about practices and things after school, that they'll be even that much later. That kids won't be coming home until late. Sometimes, like, I know my daughter goes to play practice till 5 o'clock every night right now. That'll put her till probably 5:30. And then homework on top of that. And so, that's just another concern that I have, just how late practices and things will be going, for that. And then, one thing that my husband was concerned about for the 4-day, because that many of the new programs that have been adopted, and he's really liking teaching them because he teaches 5th grade. He likes the programs, but they've all been designed for 5-day weeks. And so he was wondering what that's going to look like as far as trying to get 5 days lessons in 4 days. Just have you thought about what that's going to look like? As well as I know you said that childcare has been an ongoing discussion, and I just don't want that to be dropped either, because I know that there's a lot of families where both parents work. And so I just want that to be thought about all the time. Okay.
Mr. Williams, Mr. Gilchrist, anything to kind of, I know a number of those have been discussed, and I know the piece on the curriculum, but I haven't had specific answers related to that. I don't know if you have anything to add, or if that's something we need to further maybe specifically address, or if you have something now.
The additional hours or time should address some of that as far as curriculum goes, so I think there's an opportunity there. One of the concerns was our younger elementary kids. I mean, that's been a concern since the committee started. There's potentially some opportunity, depending on the flexibility within transportation, because there's about 100 hours difference in the requirement between elementary and high school, 900 versus 1,000. So there would be the opportunity, if it's financially feasible, for separate transportation for the younger kids, but that would be at the pleasure of the board to look at that.
I guess anybody else have any questions, any more yellow sheets out there? Okay. I guess at this point, we'll open it up for board member questions of the calendar committee.
Could I add something real quick? I just wanted to, give mine. I'm a proponent for the 4-day, and for 2 primary reasons, because I lived through the teacher recruitment issue. That was challenging, talking to 4 candidates that basically said the reason we didn't apply and look at your position is because we're not on 4-day day. So it becomes a recruitment issue, and when you've got a position like I did with physical science, and got Roger Spears, it would tickled to death, we couldn't have done any better, but that was concerning when for 4 months you got a position open like that. The other one is one of the biggest challenges I've had since taking over as the high school principal at Greenville is working in intervention and getting all kids into the needed interventions. Because I can put it in a schedule, but with the limited staff that I have, if I put a math intervention class in 5th grade, I may get a third or a quarter of the kids that actually need it, because the opposite of that is going to be a required graduation class for another set of students. So that's been an ongoing challenge, and every principal in the district, secondary principal in the district, deals with that. And the Fridays give us an option to get those kids in, to get them the intervention they need without having to get creative, pull them from electives that sometimes that elective is the reason those kids are in school. So that's, I guess, why I'm going forward with it.
Go ahead. Absolutely.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm Erin Estes. I'm a teacher in Lingle Fort Laramie and also a parent of 2 elementary students. 2 things that as a teacher perspective, I guess I'd really like to emphasize is, so in Lingo, I teach in a middle school, high school. And when we have on a frequent occasion on Fridays, when we have not just culminating sports events, but also other events with music, drama, FBLA, FCCLA, FFA, student council. A lot of those events besides just sports take place on a Friday. And the amount of substitute teachers that we have in our building on Fridays is appalling sometimes. And I know that all of those teachers that are also coaches are doing what they, in a lot of ways, a lot of things that they're very passionate about besides just being in the classroom. It does leave a lot of substitute teachers in the building on Fridays. And I think when the kids walk into a building and I'm really not exaggerating when I say this, there's sometimes in Lingle when we have like 4 or 5 teachers in the building because of the number of subs that we have, and we have lots of different events taking place on the same day. So that's something that I'd like for you to consider with the 4-day week, is that we have less time with our kids in substitute teaching with substitute teachers there. The other thing I would like to mention or emphasize is the amount of responsibilities that we have that go beyond the teacher workday. I know Mr. Kramer kind of alluded to this, but our district is really passionate about research-based techniques and research-based policies. And the work that our district collegial groups do and the work that our building level professional learning communities do is very transformational. It makes a huge impact on the learning that goes on in our classroom. And it is very hard to make that work meaningful when we don't have time in the workday to meet. I feel like our district has kind of been in this transition period where several years ago, we were taking like 2-hour blocks out of the day. And then a couple years ago, I think maybe last year, we were meeting at 7 o'clock in the morning. And now we're trying to work in these times on Friday afternoons, but a lot of our staff is gone because of coaching and activities responsibilities. And so I really am a firm believer that if we're given the time to do the work that we know is research-based with our professional learning communities and our district collegial groups, I think that we will see a tremendous impact on student achievement because we'll have time for us to actually do that meaningful work. So I hope you'll consider those things from a teacher perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Board members, do you have any questions of the calendar committee or anybody else?
I just have a random athletic type question. So Friday, if there's no school, roughly what time do you think kids would have scheduled practice?
So on a staff day, those staff members would have required what kind of that they wouldn't be able to practice during that time. I think, I mean, 1 o'clock or so. And then on those no student, no staff, I think it would be very similar to like we do during Christmas vacation, where coaches talk with their teams and set those times. So I think that's how it got to begin.
Hello, my name is Kelly Loveland, and I have 2 children currently in Lingle. As I've been listening tonight, I was just coming to listen, but I did have a couple of questions. With the 4-day implementation, would the practice after school program be available at all of the schools? Because I know like currently right now in Lingle, I don't think it's available on Fridays.
I believe that would be the intention.
If you'd like on that, please, yes. We don't want to put you on the spot, but if you can probably answer that, please.
To be able to provide in where it's vague, the state would let us be on that proposal, knowing that we do not have some of these things set in stone yet. And so what we would do is provide what the appearance policy. And so if we need a Friday program, we will have a program. Historically, we have not had a program in Tuffy. We did several years ago. But the students that attended the program at Southeast, we had typically on average 5 kiddos a day, and they were all teacher kids. And so when the teachers went home, the kids, and the state did not think that was a wide use. And so that's why we don't.
Okay.
Did that answer your question?
Yes. So just a couple other things. Currently, my 6-year-old probably 50% of the time falls asleep on the bus on the way home because it's already been a long, exciting day. I think adding more into that day could be problematic, maybe not as she gets older, but for the littles especially. I did want to touch on a comment that was made earlier about stuff keeps getting piled on the teachers without nothing being taken away. And it makes me wonder, like, why aren't we focusing on that more? You know, if there was something that could give the teachers the time that they need, because I think they are at the point of desperate, of needing that time to be able to do their jobs as well as they want to. But I think those things need to be looked at. Is there something that we could do to give them the more time, or something that we could take away? Just a thought on that. So I did go and search for myself just to try to get me as informed as possible. And I found a study, of course, it's one study, but I found a study on a rural school that actually wasn't a 5-day and they went to a 4-day. And even everybody that was apprehensive about it, once they made the transition, students and teachers and parents alike all actually preferred the 4-day over the 5 days. So that made me feel better about it. Until I read the part about when it got to year 3, the learning trajectory of the students actually took a negative decline. And then the longer the 4-day period was implemented instead of the 5-day, it kind of picked up speed. And so I guess that was one of my concerns, is if we're having a problem with teachers having enough time, you know, to be in the classroom to teach the students, I don't know if taking time away is the better option. And again, this is just from a parent point of view. And then something that Erin had mentioned that I thought of, teachers wear so many different hats. Being a coach and a parent and a teacher and a Band-Aid applier and everything that they do. And so she said, you know, the classrooms were filled with, well, filled is a loose term, but filled with substitute teachers on Fridays. And so to me, I guess it kind of did make sense where they're either going to be filled with a substitute teacher in front of the kids or they're not going to be there. So I guess I'm not understanding what the benefit of that would be. So just some thoughts I'd like you to consider, and I look forward to the February meeting. Thank you.
We probably addressed some of those, and feel free, Mr. Williams, Mr. Gilchrist, to add anything. One of the things was something we could take off our plates. We kind of, that is a really good question. One we've been talking with the legislature about, because a lot of our requirements are driven by state requirements. The state has not kept up with the normal education spending that they were just 10 years ago. We have not had an overall increase along with inflation for education. So what that does is that we have to make decisions based on staffing. And what that does is that reduces our number per pupil that we're allowed. There absolutely is a certain way that we can provide teachers more time, hiring a lot more teachers. Because that would, if that is something that we were at just a few years ago, we were able to provide 2 planning periods at the high school level when we moved from block to 8 period. The budget will not allow that right now, either at the elementary level nor at the middle school or high school level. There are some times where we're able to provide a study hall and a planning period where they're in that study hall, they are responsible for students. We've had other things added by the state. Computer science is another requirement that did not come with additional funding. Continue to pile on in that what we call the basket of goods without additional funding is not going to work for schools, and we have to make very difficult decisions, and what we've had to do in the past, and what that's meant is piling more on the staff. That continuously happens, and so we have to come up with innovative ways to meet the requirements of the state and that basket of goods, but also then keep a balanced budget in order to make sure and maintain the services that we have for our students. That's an excellent question also. Anything to add to that? Mr. Gilchrist or Mr. Williams?
The Friday sub thing, unfortunately, build this up is definitely an overstatement, because I would say most of those days when we have multiple teachers gone, we don't have subs covering them. So this probably on multiple occasions has had more than one class in her classroom while she's trying to teach, because, and God forbid, I cover a class and have to teach something and hopefully not do a repair alarm. But I mean, those Fridays are not as functional as they sound. We don't have a sub for every single classroom. When I had 22 teachers gone, I had 11 were to cover. We got to get the big warm bodies with the little warm bodies, and that becomes a math problem, not an education problem.
That's a matter of my case.
The other piece, one of your questions, and I think it was pertinent, and I don't know which study, I'd be very curious which study, but to answer that, the state kind of has a safety net built in also on that to address that, as that every 2-year review. That is part of that process, that you can have a four-day school calendar for 2 years, and then it is reviewed upon that second application to make sure those things are occurring, to make sure there's achievement levels being maintained or increasing. That can't be linked to a 4-day school week. So that's an excellent question. Wyoming just put some safety nets in place to make sure those types of things are addressed. I think I tried to at least cover yours. Did I miss anything that you can think of? Okay, but if you think of anything else, just feel free to email or call or anything you would like. Thank you.
Karen Poston, and I think most of my questions have been answered, but I did have a couple more. So for the daycare problem, I know for the kids that are going to be at school for the intervention, we will be, they'll be able to go into the practice program. But just a couple of questions about that. First of all, I'm assuming that number of students that you can take is limited. Is that correct? So that would be a concern, if there would be more than they can take. The other thing I worry about is the families that do have the 2 working parents, their kids don't need intervention, and there's going to be nothing for them. I don't know, is there something, a program or something that you could have them instead of starting at noon, there would be something that would help those parents who are going to be looking for day care for their kids for that day. The other question I have is, will the kids that are on the backpack program be sent home extra food, when they go home on Thursday? Because there will be one more day that they might have to count on meeting meals. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. We have discussed that backpack program question, and yes, we do have the funding that we can expand that program. We've even talked about some other expansive options besides that, even 4-day needed to stay with a 5-day calendar. Hoping to see some differences with the backpack because of our funding allotment right now and improving some things there for food choice and those types of activities. But yes, that would certainly be something to allow. The other piece has that there's been conversations related to other activities on that morning. One of the other things, multimedia activities we can kind of generate. It opens up a lot of opportunities that can be there. One thing that I was really surprised and lucky, I think fortunate that I have not had, my children are old enough now where we're in a childcare situation, but I was very surprised where some parents have told me currently we're already paying for a full day of childcare on Fridays because of the 1:30 dismissal. And so that impact for some of our families is not as significant as I might have thought, but it still needs to be one thing that's well thought out, conversed, and options, and working with other community organizations. I know the YMCA has talked about expanding within our community for different activities. Certainly, I think everything should be looked at to try to get our kids not involved just on Fridays if we were looking for a 4 days a week, but what other activities we can provide that structure that may be outside of the school structure that we currently have. But thank you for your question.
So in the research that we were doing, and I'm not saying that Goshen County would be the same as the other districts that we looked at, but almost every single district that we looked at said childcare was an issue for 1 year and then it wasn't. Most of the parents were able to figure something out after that first year. For example, Carla, you correct me if I'm wrong. Brighton, when they went to this, they had 1,000 kids that were coming on Fridays, and now they are down to 100. So, and that's a district of 25,000 kids. We weren't necessarily limiting those kids, kind of address Karen's question. We weren't necessarily limiting those kids that don't need intervention as we will have parents in the building. That was an idea. We also talked about facilitating, not running, facilitating high school kids, getting their, the safe babysitter, where they do first aid and all that kind of stuff. And then if they wanted us to put their number out for parents to call them, we would put that number out and the parents can get it work something out. So, but we also talked about facilitating that.
Okay. Go ahead, Chris.
Okay, I was just wondering about the special education kids that take more one-on-one time. Is it going to be set up where on the intervention days that they will be able to come in and still get that one-on-one time so they are not losing that special time for them?
You know, but it'd always be one-on-one as if we're not able to always do one-on-one even during the regular school day, but it would be very small groups, yes. Yeah, IUP time would be able to be covered. And we've talked with our special ed, my special ed teacher in the building, I shouldn't say there at the top of mine, and she said that would be a great opportunity. Sometimes you have a kid that's on an IUP where you can get their minutes met in those 4 days, and she's like, I'm not worried about them, but we have those kids that she was very worried about, and that was her question. Will I be able to get them to come in and answer with yes?
I would say that any student that their IEP required one-on-one and they're assigned a para, those paras are being expected to work in those needs. So in those cases, I would say a Friday would look very similar to
So I'm Rachel Gurney and I'm a special education teacher at Education Life. Sorry. I'm Rachel Gurney and I'm a special education teacher at Lincoln. I actually called and spoke to the significant needs special education teacher in Burns because that's what I do with Lincoln as well. And that was something that I was wondering about also. When I spoke to her, she said that when they first started the transition to the 4-day week, that it was hard to start with, but their students and the parents did get used to the transition. She said, I won't lie, it was difficult to start with. But she said once the students got used to it by about mid-September, early October, the students got used to 4 days and the parents got used to it. And it became something that it just became, the students get used to having 2 days off and then coming to school for 5 days. They got used to having 3 days off and coming to school for 4 days. But she did say that they started out having some of their more significant needs students on those every Friday. And it eventually became something that when the students would come on Friday, they weren't doing their regular schoolwork every Friday because they were only there for a few hours. And so they would come in and do like life skill things like go through doing laundry that they could just do in the building or go through doing dishes or things like that. But then once the parents realized that that was what they were coming in and doing in school, the parents were like, well, I can have them do those kind of things at my house to work on those skills as well. So some of the students were coming in and doing the extra time at the school to get IEP minutes. But once they realized that that wasn't necessarily something that they had to do to meet IEP minutes, because they were still getting their minutes based off of their 4-day week when they built their IEPs with times 4 days versus 5 days, it wasn't ever something that was a concern.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jamie Mailing. I'm a parent of 3 middle school age students at Southeast. I've been in various teaching positions across 3 states and several districts for about 20 years. So I intended to put something like in writing and I just kind of wanted to wait and see what played out. So I have lots of questions that are all over the place. So I know we've addressed some of the practice program things. But a couple of the questions that I have with that, like, again, can it be district wide if needed? And that was kind of addressed. Along with that, will busing and lunch options be available? How will that, or has that been considered already?
Busing, yes. We've kind of had discussion related to lunch that would depend on programs that would exist within there and how that would look as a possibility. But transportation, absolutely.
Okay, I just know for those of us that are outliers, that would be important.
It would be very similar to how we operate the summer school bus schedule.
Okay.
It would be dependent upon which areas of the students'
Sure.
needs and addressing those.
Okay.
Making sure they have the ride to get there.
Yeah, perfect. And then, like, what physical spaces would be used if, especially like in Torrington, there could potentially be hundreds of kids here. So where are they going to go? Are they going to be in classrooms, in the gym? Like if I was a classroom teacher here, I don't want somebody else in my classroom all day Friday if I'm in meetings or if I'm supposed to be working in my classroom. Where are all these kids going to be? Are they going to be in my space? Has that been thought about at all?
I'll let Mr. Williams or Mr. Gilchrist, if they've addressed that. I would say probably, especially at the Torrington High School level, that necessarily wouldn't be something where the students would be high in numbers at Torrington High School, other than the intervention piece, which would be then in the classrooms, of course. Middle school would be the gymnasiums and then the activities that they would be involved in. But I don't know, elementary wise, legal wise, if they want to address that individual question.
No, when I talked about it with the teachers, we just talked about a building plan and they would like to just, if it comes, we're gonna address. I don't, in my building, anyways, I don't have any specific plan right now. Right.
And we've had the same conversations with certainly our facilities could handle it and the personnel we have in the building, I think it would be an issue. Certainly, if we're talking 40 extra students, that'd be one thing, but I think 100 extra students, that's another thing.
Right.
But either way, with the staffing we would have in the building, just with our educators, we would be able to do that.
Okay. Let's see, some other questions that I have. I feel like a lot of this is, and I get it because my kids are involved in sports too, but and I did talk pretty extensively the other night with Mr. Bullington and he answered a lot of my questions. So like on Fridays, if we're talking about scheduling with CWAC schools for Southeast and Lingle especially, so if we have a lot of kids gone now for various activities on Fridays and we go to a 4-day week, those teachers are still going to be gone on Fridays. So they're still going to be missing like the collegial time, the PD time, because then we're going to schedule things on Fridays, especially because we went to a 4-day week. So the same teachers that are missing that PD on Friday afternoons are now going to be missing it all day Friday, potentially, as well as kids that might need interventions are going to activities. So I just don't know, like, I'm not sold yet, I guess. Trying to keep an open mind. I'm not sure that that's really the way to go about it. I kind of agree with Kelly, like, it feels like teachers are constantly, and I know you kind of address this, but constantly you're adding more to the plate and things never go away. So I think, maybe if there's any creative ways to take some of that off. The collegial thing, I know it has its benefits, but maybe we overdo it. I don't know. I'm not a teacher here, so I can't say that from personal experience. Some of my other concerns are, so it's Friday school, kids, especially high school kids, are gonna say, oh, it's Friday school, I don't have to go. I don't need that, because if they're not putting in the time during the week and putting forth the effort during the week, do you really think they're gonna show up on Friday morning? I don't really see that happening. If you're realistic about high school students, especially, I don't know that that's gonna happen. For me personally, like the daycare thing isn't an issue because my kids are older. But I do foresee it being a huge issue for kids or for families with elementary students. And even for me personally, that's 30 Fridays that my kids are sitting at home by themselves without two parents. And they're old enough to take care of themselves, that's not the issue. But that's 30 Fridays, we both work on Fridays, I can't be gone every Friday. You know, I can't do that, so there's 30 days, that's an entire month that my kids are sitting home by themselves. And in theory, I mean, they'll be in practices and games and so forth. So then how do I, if I'm working, how do I get my kids to practices at 1 o'clock in the afternoon? I can't do that. I don't know how you make that work. So just lots of questions, just kind of food for thought for you guys, I guess. As far as I was a sub for a long time in this district, so I understand the sub situation. So on Fridays, if our teachers are supposed to be doing interventions and they're not there because they're a sports event, do they have a sub? So we're still in the sub situation on Fridays, if even with intervention time. What else? So like another, I guess another big thing is, I understand that, and maybe I addressed this already, I feel like I'm rambling, I'm sorry. Southeast and Lingle, I understand with the small numbers, if we have a lot of kids gone for sports, Mr. Bullington mentioned a couple weeks ago, and we only had 23 kids left in the high school one Friday afternoon. Okay, but what about the like 1,200 kids in the rest of the district that were still there? Are we only doing this for those small portions of kids? Like how many, who, I'll just leave it at that. And then the other thing that came up the other night that I just like have a concern about if we do go to the 4-day week. It was commented that next year's sports schedules are already in place for the high school, especially. I guess I would say at this point it's January. Even when we vote on this, it's only February. That gives us till August to rearrange sporting events contracts. If we are going to go to a 4-day week, I think that it's important that we make sure that those sports schedules get adjusted already for next fall. Because you don't want 1 year of a nightmare of this calendar because of sports. And then, oh, but it'll be fixed the next year because that's not going to sit well with your community members. So I hope I didn't ramble on, sorry, just good for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
One thing I just kind of talk about too is that piece of flex time. And I can look at it from a parent perspective. Right now, my son spends 90 minutes a day in a exploratory. There are some that are really, really good, and there's some that I kind of raise my eyebrow because it's a filler. And the other students who are struggling are having to go to meet with those teachers that they are behind and they're getting that flex time. But my son is going to 90 minutes of time that is not really challenging him academically to meet the needs of students who are needing those services, and they need those services, no question about it. I totally, from the superintendent perspective, agree with flex. From the parent perspective, it's a little harder that 90 minutes of my son's day is spent in classes that are not necessarily highly focused academically because those core teachers are working with those flex groups. And that's a lot of time. That is an absolutely lot of time for that when we can look at other opportunities for flex. The other piece that I kind of look at from the high school perspective, I don't disagree, Jamie, on students coming. But what I really think is important, or not coming on Fridays, excuse me, I think it's really important to focus on the ones that would be there. What could we do for students? What could we say? This is something for students with individualized education plans. What could we do for them on Fridays if we had that time to spend more one-on-one with kids? And what could we do to expand their learning opportunities and get them to where we want them to be if we have that time? Because that is a huge issue right now. And as a parent with a student who has an individualized education plan, my day looks drastically different than when my other children come home. My other children take care of their homework at school. Rarely, if ever, I can't think of any time there's homework for a couple of my children. For my student that has an individualized education plan, It is every night and it is multiple hours. That is a lot for parents. And so if we could, again, provide those services in a different way for those families, because unfortunately, I'm very lucky. I'm married to an educator. She knows what she's doing when she's working with our children in that facet. And I can help some. But I know the number of hours that our parents are spending at work and then having to do and support those kids. We're not doing what we need to do. Our current structure has not met the change of our society. It just hasn't. We haven't changed it. It's been the same for hundreds of years, and we have not adapted to what we need. And in 2 years, maybe this isn't the answer for us and hasn't had a drastic change. But we need to look at something different, as Mr. Williams has looked at recruiting, and Mr. Gilchrist has referenced that. And we need to look at something different for our kids. And we have to, because if we continue to roll the same things out year after year, we'll get the exact same results we've gotten year after year after year. And it's not growing, it's maintaining. I'm proud of what we do as a district. I am, but I know we can do that much better. And we have to look at some innovative ideas that really help kids and help staff. We went through training today, and some of the things we talked about in that admin PLC were specifically generating highly engaging lessons for teachers. But if we're not providing an alternative time and an intense time for students, it's not going to have the impact that we want it to. And we have to look at those things. Because yeah, you're absolutely right. Your concerns are valid. And your concerns are questioning, and it is not everything is answered, and we will not ever be able to answer all those questions. But they're good to be thinking about, plan as we can, and make adaptations and address it as best we can. But some things are going to be very difficult. These 9 members have a very difficult decision ahead of them, realizing that there are strong feelings on both sides. This is challenging for them, and I don't envy them in any way regarding this decision. But I can tell you from the standpoint of what I see on a daily basis, the best options that we have are looking extensively at something that will make a difference to kids. And I can see the benefit for kids on that 4-day school week, and still looking to, as best we possibly can, address the needs of the students and still create those innovative lessons, because that's where it truly matters. A 30-minute high engaging lesson is far, far exceeding an hour in front of a teacher that's not as engaging as that 30 minutes would be.
Good. Friday, Jamie, that was a topic that came up as far as teacher availability on Friday. I can only speak for my building, because that's the only data I have access to. But I would say the difference between teachers being gone Friday afternoon versus Friday morning would be an 80% difference. The majority of our time, our teachers, where they're traveling, they're having to leave at noon to go to a game with the coaches. That 8 o'clock to noon time frame would have the majority of our teachers in the building for that. Now, that's not to say they're not going to take days off, because that certainly is going to happen, but I can't think of a circumstance where we wouldn't have enough support with our grade level teams, our discipline teams, that we couldn't cover for one another. So I think the expectation would certainly be that there would be some on Friday, except for extreme circumstances. But even in my Friday that we've been using as an example, we would have certainly been able to provide intervention to the staff we had.
I'm just curious, so on that same note, so when you've got 21 teachers on, how many kids were on that day? Because I imagine a lot of them. We couldn't have had very many kids in the building, if there were that many teachers on activity.
I don't know exactly, but it wasn't as many as you would think, because we didn't have any middle school activities at that time. And almost all of my teachers teach middle school and high school classes.
So my other thought is, Tim had mentioned, Swanick had mentioned, like we do the 40 week, like kind of convert wanting to do junior high quads on Friday at like 10 o'clock. So that would shift that timing if we were to follow through.
So, outpacing Lingle and with the help of our principals last year, we did get those, schools to agree to move things later. And then we talked very heavily at our AD meetings, both just within the conference and within the state, about not stacking junior high, high school on top of each other, because that was really what was going on. It was at Burns. We were asked to go at 10, we got to move it to noon, and then again, we got to move it to 1. And what had happened was they had junior high games, and then they had high school games later that night. And they were in 3A at that time, and then in 3A, you played freshman, you played AP, you played varsity, so 3 levels of high school, and they were having 4 levels of junior high. So there was just a lot of games to do that day. As a conference, I know the CWAC has been very cognizant of that group of guys are amazing, and they work well together. We've moved things around so that is not as big of a concern, and they know that we would not want to start before 1 o'clock ever. So.
One thing I did forget to address, Gina, and one of your questions was the ADs adjusting schedules. As a former AD, I can kind of speak to that yes, you make attempts, and I think our ADs would work their tail off. Unfortunately, it is like a domino effect, and when you're asking those types of things of other to make arrangements, I think Mr. Bartlett could probably attest to this the most. In his first year, when he had an extremely organized activities director ahead of him that had everything laid out. When you come into those positions and then you try to change that schedule, getting another school because their coach and their AD have worked hard to avoid playing Southeastern Lingo because we know that's gonna be a tough game. So we don't want 2 back-to-back tough games. So we're not gonna move it to a Thursday, but we'll move it to a Monday. That first year, I think we would work towards trying to adjust as many as possible. It's not going to be a perfect transition because those schedules are 2 years out. Some schools will be absolutely more than willing. Those that are on a 4-day week, absolutely. And that's a large number for Southeastern Lingo. When we talk about Torrington, moving, it seems, and I worked with Mr. Bartlett on this just for some time to this, with volleyball and football conflicts. To even move 1 game for them on that schedule was much more difficult. But in saying that, there are a number of 3A schools that are starting to look at and have the same exact conversation across the state because they're experiencing the same challenges and difficulties we are. So it's expanding rather than diminishing the numbers of schools out in the state that are doing that. Sorry, I missed that the first time I answered.
Go ahead, Tim, and then.
So just to add to what Mr. Kramer was saying, I know like when we started playing last went to their 4-day calendar. Like you said, Mr. Kramer, that first year, it's not going to be perfect. But there will be a lot of teams who will work with us and we'll do our best, but it's not going to be perfect. For example, when they first went to 4-day calendar, we continued to play them on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and they came down and they missed school. And then administration and as we have talked, we don't want our kids to miss school. It would be our expectation that as many of those things would be on Friday and Saturday as possible. Well, now they're even to the point where we don't play them. I think in junior high football this year, we played them at 5:30 or 6 because they don't even leave. It was on a Thursday night because that's when we could do it, but we moved everything late up. And in talking with their AD, Ryan Nelson, the game lasted about an hour and a half, and they were about an hour and a half there. So we did it on a Thursday night. I know we're playing Saratoga in varsity contest this year on a Thursday night. They don't mind traveling on a Thursday. They'll leave, later in the day. We push the game as late as we can on Thursday, and then they just know that they're going to get home late that night with school the next day. Those are some of the things we can do, but it's not going to be perfect.
Is it my understanding, and I'm asking for clarification, on these Friday work days, there would be a teacher from 8 to 10:30, is that correct? And then it goes to Paris until noon-ish, and then it transitions to some kind of day.
Mr. Williams and Mr. Newkirk answer that question.
Yeah, you're correct. I mean, the teachers would be doing interventions with para support until around 10. And then the paras would, be responsible until noon, and then the practice program, which they do a variety of things. I don't know when that wants to expand on that at all or not, but, they do a variety of things with those kids until 5:30.
The other question was, in counting these weeks on this balanced option, it appears in the first trimester that there are 9 weeks, and in the last trimester there are 9 weeks, but in the middle there's only 7. Because we have Christmas and Thanksgiving.
We would, this one is an example, it's still semesters. So first semester ends January 19th. And I would start the second semester on January 22nd. So this is an example of semesters and trimesters.
My mistake.
No worries.
Any other questions?
Hi, my name is Corey Colson. I got 2 kids that go to Southeast. Unlike most people who've been asking questions, I'm not an educator or anything else, just a parent. And I was just wondering about some numbers wise. So we're talking about getting these kids in front of teachers more, which is great. So on Friday, how many kids are we looking to have in school on Friday that are going to need intervention or go to these things? And then how many of these kids that need to go to this intervention are going to be gone for sports? I mean, we're going to have the same issue like that. I mean, I'm not against a 4-day thing. We did it when I was little. That just meant you had to go to the house and work with the old man. So, I mean, my kids are probably more apt to go to school than have to stay home and work with me. So, you know, it just depends. And then, so kind of numbers wise, because I know a lot of this is staff based and stuff like that. So I guess that's one of my questions too. It's like, so then we're devoting this time for teachers from 7 to 10 or 8, whatever it is during that time. Well, are we still trying to schedule weeks at noon? We're trying to do them earlier. They have to go to intervention before they go to team sports, you know, how or what, or just curiosities I have. And then yeah, you always think of such good questions when you send that. I think you already addressed the bus schedule and things like that. I guess just the question of what, I guess one of the questions I had to say, we're talking about change, needing to change things. From my understanding, Southeast graduates, like 99% of the kids they have, so does Lingle, which is great accomplishments. I don't know what quarantine is because I don't have kids up here. So is there something we're missing that we need to change these things? And you talk about historically, it's been that way for 100 years, yeah, because we're trying to teach kids, you know, you need to go work an 8-hour factory day. You need to go have 8 hours of free time and go to bed for 8 hours a day. You know, and we realize that's not the way we're at anymore. So I guess what changes are we looking at? Because I also understand there's supposed to be a big difference of kids starting later. My kids are getting old enough, it don't matter. But I mean, even a 12, 13-year-old getting him up at 6:30 to be on the bus at 6:40, still not the most fun thing I do. So that's kind of my question is what we're talking about changing these things, moving forward to these things. So are we, what changes are we trying to make I mean, I'm a big proponent of it's not broke, don't fix it. So, but I'm also a big proponent that, you know, if we can get them outside the classroom too, and teach them some at home, you know, that doesn't bother me either. So, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I answer one of those before I forget it, because it's a really good question on the changes piece. And absolutely, we have some schools in our district that are achieving at extremely high levels. There's no question about it. The word I use is it sustainable? Are the teachers that we currently have going to be able to sustain that for their entire career? Because right now, I can tell you the mental health of those teachers who are stretching themselves to the absolute limit. Unfortunately, those are the ones that are early retirement, or they look for other fields because they can't sustain that level of work for that much in their entire career. And that's what worries me, but it's a great question, because you're absolutely right. There are things going on in our district that are absolutely phenomenal, and want to maintain those. And we want to continue those, but I want to continue that for that entire teacher's career, as opposed to the conversations I'm having to have now with teachers is please stay in this profession, because we need you for kids. And those conversations are hard, because we're just wearing them to the bone. It's one thing after another. The number of kids in interventions will vary dramatically. I would say your elementary would probably be your highest number of kids needing intervention. That's what we see typically. I'm not going to put Mr. Florshinger on the spot, but I know we have had extensive conversations about the number of students at Trail Elementary that we have in interventions right now. But then also at the high school level and some of the different high schools around the district, there may not be that level, but we can also focus on individual students, because I know as I've talked with individual teachers, there's always that one or two students they'd like to have just a little bit of extra time with, so they could really focus on the learning aspect. One of the things as a parent that I've tried to really emphasize with my son has been some of these classes that are a little bit harder. I'm okay with a C, but I really want you to maintain that idea that you're learning it. That if you learn algebra and you know it, the next course that you're going to take is going to be absolutely that much easier, because I can have experience from my children when we just kind of jump through the hoop to try to maintain that game, play the game of school. Well, I can turn in this and I'm going to get a good enough grade to get a B. Yeah, that's good enough. I can kind of sit back and not understand this in the back of the classroom and not be a disruption to my teacher and make it through with a B, but I don't learn that concept, and it doesn't come up. It doesn't come up that year in algebra. It might even not come up in algebra 2. But then when we take the college level placement to get into EWC, or we're taking the ACT, and they didn't grasp those concepts of algebra, the expected score on what he should have been getting is not what we would have thought. And that's what is key, is how can we provide that time with those really phenomenal teachers to make sure that those kids have learned it, not just played the game of school. And that's a real challenge. I'm missing some of your questions. I'm going to actually go back over my notes while Mr. Williams maybe add to that.
I don't think we can overstate the importance of the availability of teachers at 8 a.m. versus 2 p.m. on a Friday. Again, a lot of our travel, the majority of our travel, again, was we're heading to Bighorn or Rocky Mountain or something like that. It's going to be taking place noon or later. So the availability of those coaches, those teachers, those parents who would have been gone at 8 a.m. is going to be much higher. And certainly the same thing with our athletes who need the intervention or enrichment. So I understand the concern we're stating. It seems counterintuitive that we're trying to do it on the same day, but there's a huge difference between having those athletes and those teachers available at 8 a.m. versus 2 p.m. Right. So real quick, Kelly, one of your questions about the implementation that you were referring to, Ms. Laura, around some information on that.
So I just wanted to address Mrs. Loveland's question on the decrease in test scores over a period of time after year 3. Interestingly enough, I served on a calendar committee, and that's one of the documents that we found and looked at, the same set of data. And what and in fact, I have it right here, the data was talking about math scores and reading scores, and we put that for 3 years. The committee that we worked with felt that with Goshen County Schools, the fact that we've implemented OG, the data in this particular document did not take a look at the types of curriculums that were being utilized in the classroom. So our feeling was, with this data focusing on math and reading, Goshen County Schools uses OG, the Word Gillingham, for language arts. And then in the K through 6, they implemented the Eureka Squared math. So our feeling was that one of the ways that we could mitigate those concerns are with the curriculums that we're implementing in the classrooms in Goshen County Schools. Hope that answers your question. And then I would like to add one thing. Mr. Kramer, Mr. Gilchrist, and Mr. Williams all spoke about teachers being able to recruit and retain them. One of the things from human resources that I would like to add is we have trouble even attracting applicants to our position. So my concern for human resources is who are we missing out on as an applicant, because they're taking a look at Goshen County Schools. They see we're in a 5-day school year. They look at others around the state where salaries are comparable, benefits are comparable, and they choose not even to apply to Goshen County School. Are we missing out on some really phenomenal educators who are simply choosing, not only are they interviewing with us and then declining, but are they not even applying with us because we have a 5-day school? Thank you.
So one more thing to add, kind of in perspective that I found, prior to the salary relations conversation last spring, I had actually had a couple of parents ask me, well, when are we going to have the conversation about a 4-day school week again? And I was hesitant to bring it back up. There are a lot of things that come with some difficult decisions, and that's one of them. And I knew that for these trustees. And then we went through the process in salary relations. Salary relations for us is an interest-based bargaining activity that we work very closely with the staff and the trustees in the same room. We work through a lot of issues. And many of these issues continually come up with teachers in regards to their mental health and time. And that impacts our students. That has a huge impact on our students. That is you can't actually diagram how much of an impact that has. And you have those questions over your career in administration. How do we address these things? What are some answers or what are some options to address these things? Even this fall, when I assigned Mr. Williams and Mr. Gilchrist to chair this committee, I was not necessarily a strong proponent of a 4-day school week. Then I sat in those committee meetings and listened to some of the things that a 4-day school week would allow us to do regarding intervention time for kids, regarding some planning time for teachers to really hone in again. And I'm gonna reiterate this because I do want to be a broken record on this. If we have great lessons, the impact that has on versus good lessons is tremendous. So if we have those things, we are engaging kids a lot more, and it's about time for our teachers to do that. And I've been, as you can kind of see, a pretty staunch proponent this evening of that 4-day school week. But going into it with an open mind and seeing some of the things that we can possibly benefit has helped. Now, is it the end all be all, the savior, everything that we need? No, absolutely not. It will not fix everything that we want to address in our district. But is it a step is there a possible step in the right direction to address some of the concerns that teachers regularly come to me? what I found, yes, it is. Great question back there.
Yes, I talked about the impact on the teachers. What about the impact on the kids? I have two kids. And they are on, they need help. And there's gonna be a lot of impact on them when they only have 4 days.
And that's, I didn't want to interrupt you again, I apologize. That's what I'm talking about, that thing, those lessons for your child, for my child. Absolutely, if they are highly engaging. Those lessons that we can raise to that level will have an impact. That will have an effect, and it will be a positive effect. As opposed to having a teacher who didn't have time because they were scrambling by. Those lessons, those high impact lessons that they have new, that will make the impact on your child's learning and my child's learning. The other thing too, this affects me as a parent also. This affects me significantly. It doesn't affect my time or work time within here as a district. It doesn't. Mine's going to remain the same. But I know I want to see what's best for my kids also. And as a parent, what I see right now from the teachers that are working with my kids, and I know what they're capable of doing and are doing even with the time, I want to see those teachers stay in the profession and make sure they can do it for 10, 15, 20 more years and have as much impact on all of our students as possible.
But what's being changed if they're not there on Fridays? When you call on Mondays or Tuesdays to talk to the teachers, and oh, they aren't here today. What's being make the difference?
I guess I need more elaboration.
About my kids, because 2 days off during the weekend, they have trouble.
I misunderstood your question, I think, on what you were talking related to.
The school teachers want Friday off to their stuff. You call on Monday or Tuesday, and you can't get them because they're off.
Teachers are off on Mondays and Tuesdays, is that what you're saying?
The teachers, yeah. They have Fridays off and they decide to set up their meeting for Monday or Tuesdays, but they make the difference.
One of the biggest impacts, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to address your question specifically, but teachers only have 11 PTO days that they are allowed, and they get each year. Now, if they have been within the district for more than a year, they might have allocated or actually been able to bank more. So that's not just 11, but I can tell you that our teachers, the number of teachers that rarely use their days is extremely high. I don't have numbers, but our teachers want to be in the classroom and teaching, and they also want to be able to have time to be able to provide the absolute best lessons for your kids. That's a huge impact.
Would it be possible to, like, between now and that February board meeting, to do a truly anonymous survey, especially teachers, but all staff in the district for their response to a 4-day or a balance or a traditional calendar?
I'll let Mr. Williams address that question, because that means it has been on.
So, yeah, we will survey all stakeholders, and they will come out after this meeting, and we hope to have that information for our next meeting. But that is something that we had talked about. We debated about doing it before this meeting or after this meeting. We thought it would be better to do it after this meeting, so some of that information was out there. Some of the questions were answered, and people could make a more informed decision. So that is coming.
Go ahead.
I think it's great that we want to offer more intervention time. So I think that's awesome that we can somehow do it through one of these two calendars. And I just have questions about that. I just want to know, are the students in the intervention static or are they fluid? Like, are they going to be changing every week? Are they going to be the same kids for the whole semester? What's that going to look like? And then if it's fluid, how are you, informing the parents that your kid needs to be here this Friday? Or this week, or whatever the calendar allots for. And then also, will attendance be taken to make sure that those kids are there? Is there a way to make sure that those kids are there, or is it kind of just, at will? They get there if they want to, and not if they don't. I mean, because I think if I'm hearing this correctly, that those aren't considered part of their 175 days in the classroom. So I don't know if there's a way to make sure that they get there or not. So I just was wondering about that.
Mr. Williams and Mr. Goker start off with that, and if I can add, I can do that.
And so the kids coming for intervention. And what we use, and I'm not speaking for every building, what we use is an app called Band. And we have a lady that sits at our front desk that if you're not in band, she hounds you and hounds you and hounds you, and then all of a sudden you are. And you know, just like this morning, you know, we went from a late start to a virtual snow day, and we sent that out as soon as I got the call from Mr. Kramer. And you can see who has seen those messages, who hasn't. We utilize that if you go through and you know that somebody that needs to see that message has not viewed it, then we use other means of communication, but that is our main means of communication. And to answer your last question, yeah, it's not, you can't make it mandatory. It's heavily suggested. We work hard to get those kids in. And we rely on parents. I'll just use, for example, right now, Southeast for our missing assignments list. If you have 3 or more missing assignments, we communicate with parents through band and tell them that their kids need to stay after school that following day. And we do that until 4:45. And we've had great parent support. Our dean of students, Mr. Morgan, works with those kids. If they miss, we have other opportunities, you know, where sometimes we're doing event at 7 a.m. because it's not important. But we make a lot of accommodation and try to get them in there as much as possible and work with the families that we have. So.
I think certainly the intention would be to make sure parents are aware as soon as possible. But I also know when you've heard the phrase, we make a plan, God laughs, he was thinking of education this year. So I'm pretty sure whatever plan we have in place in September 1st will be different on October 1st. Just because it's a pretty big unknown for us. So but the expectation would be certainly to make parents aware as quickly as possible and get that communication out in whatever way it needs to be.
A concern I thought about when you said that the that the Fridays would be fluid and you can come if you want to come and don't if you don't. Reminds me of a true situation that happened over in Noel Mitchell to a little girl where mom thought dad had taken her to school and school never really checked her in or didn't know she was missing or something. Wasn't until 3:30 when mom went to pick her up that they realized she wasn't there. And come to find out he had taken her out and raped her and killed her. What safeguards do you have for parents who assume that maybe he says, yeah, I'm going to school on Friday, and maybe he doesn't. What safety nets are there to protect parents, kids, whatever, to make sure kids are where they're supposed to be? Because in this big bad world, big bad things happen.
I guess to me, I could address one of the same similar things would be, well, our virtual snow day would be a great example. Communication is key. There have been very easily a student who may not have gotten the message in relation to school was on virtual and then dropped off at the school, what kind of safety mechanisms do we have in those type of situations? Not only with our community, but within our communication system. I would say the same thing with fluid and static, or a fluid situation on interventions. Knowing a calendar is important, but also what safety mechanisms do we have regarding custodians checking out in front, what types of things do we have, even when we don't have school. But when we do have intervention days, and a student may not have been needed for intervention, that school's still active. Secretary's there, those people are all there on those days. It would be the days in which we have off, very similar to the calendar right now. When we come on one of our vacation days, and I'd have to look at a calendar right now in front of us that's just traditional, where we have one day off that students or teachers aren't in there. What are our policies and practices related to that? How do we make sure those students don't come on those days? We communicate it. We make sure that there's communication between parents and families, and we remind, we have social media, all those things working together to make sure that we try to communicate the best way we possibly can, as Mr. Williams referenced with band and the other utilization of things that we have in place. Mr. Gilchrist, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think it would be very similar to the safety procedures we currently have now. We would have a sign-up sheet. We know which students were intended to be there, and if they're not, we would. Currently, the expectation before 9 o'clock, we're making contact with parents if the student's not in our building that's supposed to be. And it'd be very similar to that. And then, we have that concern. I've run into that situation myself when we call it snow day, and I always go over before 8 o'clock because I've on several occasions found kids huddled up in the foyer waiting to get in, and we're dropped off. And so that's just standard operating procedure for us, and the safety procedures we have in place. And again, it'll be a somewhat moving target, but we will be keeping very good track of the kids that are supposed to be in our.
So would there be like a sign-up sheet? Yes, I intend Joey to go to be there tomorrow.
I would assume so. The logistics, of course, would just have to be worked out to a certain extent, but yeah, I would envision something of for the intervention kids, a invitation, communication with parents, sign-up sheet, and then depending on the enrichment and what that looks like, there's probably be a separate sign-in sheet so we would know who was intended to be there.
But I think with elementary too, it becomes less fluid because when we're starting to deal with interventions related to reading and math, those aren't on a weekly basis that we somehow raise a student from the 10th percentile on our assessment to the 40th percentile where they no longer need interventions. Those are much longer in nature. It could be, I would say at a minimum, speaking from the principal perspective, and I'd let a principal add to this, but in my experience, we set out interventions at the elementary level at a minimum 6 weeks in length to monitor that. Now, the ones that may last for a week, I can see the high school ones being more like that because you're missing assignments in high school, the amount of those types of things for middle school. So it looks different at each level, and that level of what is required and what is needed based on that communication is just as important. And same thing what we had with flex, when we've had flex at times where kids would be here at the end of the day and some would be done. That communication would need to be in place to make sure parents knew where kids were and where the administration is aware they're at too.
I thought of another thing, thanks, Mr. Gilchrist. We've talked a lot about the kids that need interventions. What about our high kids? Can we offer enrichments too? I mean, I would be a whole lot more on board with a 4-day week if we can offer set enrichment opportunities on Fridays. We have a lot of kids that need to be pushed harder, that need more on that top end, and they get forgotten about because so many of our resources go to the special ed kids, and I understand that. I'd be happy to help with that conversation. I actually have an endorsement in high ability learning. Like, I would love to see this. So just to throw that out there, if we go to this, let's implement that along with the interventions.
Great idea. I just got a question for you guys for the committee. I kind of read between the lines, but I can kind of guess which way your staff would want to go, but it would be helpful if someone asked to have an actual survey. These guys said we'd provide that, but at the high school level, rough idea, what do you guys think the kids would? I don't know if we could get a survey, at least at the high school level, but I'd be curious to see. You know, to see it. That was part of my. Yeah. The survey that we.
They would also be surveyed.
That was one of the things, again, as Mr. Williams referenced, we talked about, in that committee, when would be the best time to have a survey. You know, to make sure, we talked with the committee members from the trustees as to whether that survey should go out before this evening or it should go after. We wanted to make sure we had accurate information out there, because prior to tonight, we did try to get some of the things out there. But I think our conversation and the questions that have happened tonight allow us to kind of expand that knowledge. And I think that's the most important fact, because going in with a growth mindset to be able to at least listen, that doesn't mean that minds need to be changed in a way that is positive for this, but making an actually informed decision related to a survey is extremely vital in order to get accurate information, as opposed to where you came into the conversation and just have a strong feel one way or the other. Because it's just as important as if you walked into the situation being a huge proponent of a 4-day school week and then learn more and thought about it and comprehended it and had some further questions that maybe gave you an opportunity to change that aspect, which is fine also. Those things are important to make sure we have an accurate survey that's going out, and that was what was part of that conversation.
Okay, I believe you were on your way up here.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Teresa Milner. I live in Yoder. My daughter's a student at Southeast Elementary School. And is heading into middle school yesterday. Mr. Kramer, you mentioned the flex system. Is that something that's going to change with the 4-day week? As someone that was a high achiever and all through school and a parent of a high achiever, I think that I'm kind of with Jamie, where I think sometimes those kids on the higher end get left off. And so I guess I agree with her. It'd be great to see. And I just wonder, as teachers, if you think where you have that extra in time to do intervention at the end of the week, if you think that you can do a better job teaching to the whole spectrum of kids or the whole breadth of kids in your classroom, if you think that a 4-day week will help that situation. I just know that sometimes those kids that aren't challenged, that's when they lose interest and lose focus. So I'm wondering if this would actually help that problem as well. Was a terrible way of asking that question. I was just gonna ask him after the fact, but I thought maybe that was something important that he'd want to express in front of everybody, so.
I think it would certainly be our intention with that extra time. That's the needs there, and we're all aware of it, and sometimes unfortunately it becomes a little bit of triage with our time. So this would, I believe, would create a very functional time for gifted and talented, or to the mind, just enrichment across all levels. And think about the high school and the opportunities for Miss June's students coming on those Fridays for enrichment and add. I think it would certainly create that opportunity for us to do. It would at least make it an option, and I think that triage aspect out of it. It would be real.
And that was one of my other questions. Would that be a time that would be open for, say, FFA teams to come in and practice or things along that line? Is that something else? Because it's not, kids aren't just missing school because of sports, they're missing it for other CTE organizations. FFA is a big one. I know that we purposely schedule events on Fridays simply because so many chapters across the state have Fridays off. So is that something else that you guys are potentially looking at? Is that would be a time where kids involved in other student organizations could come in and work on projects and practice?
Absolutely. I think that would be a certain, there would be a certain priority list that the student is needed for this, and this, and it'll be a priority list, but I think at this time, looking at the potential for those values, everything.
Thank you.
Thank you. Was there,
My name is Shaylee Martin, I'm a teacher here at Goshen High School, and I just thought as well, the question of enrichment for some of those kids that don't have anything on Friday is even if they're a mentor or, you know, someone that can come in and maybe help other kids for, you know, something that maybe they don't understand, and might be something for them in that class or headache or something like that.
Mr. Chairman, Superintendent, staff, question specifically on the surveys. How are those going to be worded so it's not pointed to get the answers you want? I mean, because we've got kind of three options here that's mentioned. You've got the 4-day, you've got the balanced, and we've got no change. So does it go offer all of those? How are those going to be delivered? Not everyone may go to the Goshen County's website to say, I want to do a survey. Is it going to be handed to students, kind of like a permission slip for parents to sign? How are we going to get the most involvement out of all stakeholders on that? And like someone had mentioned, it was going to be anonymous and it was electronic. Is that going to be some source that is outside of the district? Because I know there's several companies that do outside services that can remain anonymous and stuff. Some things to think about. On the balance thing, I know we've focused a lot on the 4-day. On the balance side, there's 2 weeks off. I know that a lot of kids, and I think even teachers will probably agree that when you have a Christmas break or something, and you have that long extended period, I think there's a learning curve for those kids and everyone when they come back from the beginning of those things. And now we're adding more of those in. How is that really going to play into things? And lastly, we're considering if we're considering ideas to retain staff and staff being gone on Fridays, I'm thinking a lot of that may be as a result of some of them being coaches. Maybe some of our teachers should not be coaches and staff. Maybe we need to look at outside sources to keep them in more. That's a radical idea.
I'll let Mr. Gilchrist, Mr. Williams, maybe or Holly address that. I'll address the last one on the coaching aspect. We already welcome any and all applicants for our coaching positions. Certainly not just our staff. If you've seen the openings that are available right now relating to coaching, it's pretty extensive, and that's every single year. We are absolutely dependent upon community members. And that's also too, when we talk about the time aspect, we've had traditionally, and I don't know if any teacher or former AD would want to speak to that, but we've had many fewer staff members Vivaldi coaching because of the impact and the amount of time commitment that has resulted in due to their daily requirement, because they are teachers first and coaches second, and they know that if their coaching starts to interfere with their teaching, they're less likely to keep that position of the coaching aspect, and that load gets heavier and heavier. There is an impact for having our teachers as coaches, because those relationships and those kids going out there are fundamentally very important. But I've had a lot of success with community members being involved in coaching, but are not always available to be there either. Holly, if you want to kind of answer a survey piece or anything related to that.
Sure. Goshen County works with a third-party vendor, Qualtrics, to administer our survey. So I will work with them on the best delivery for staff. It's relatively simple, and the employee survey that we did in the spring. Students I'll work with at the building level, what works best for them, and also for parents. I know that everybody is really today, but in the Brian, think that our teachers, that's their job first. First and foremost, they're the teachers, and second, they're coaches. Really, as a student, they have pride outside of school, and I don't think people understand that if they are not happy, because they can't get home with their kids and they're stuck in the school for a lot of time, because you're not allowing them to do what they need to do, then our kids are going to be suffering. So, teachers, yes, our teachers, yes, our coaches, that is our private coach for this, so find something not that hate some extra time and give them the time to relax and enjoy their life and not to let them.
Any other questions? We have about 10 minutes left until 9 o'clock, so.
I have a quick question, Mr. Kramer. And this might have been before you, we had a good program here about 4 or 5 years ago. Was it a state budget cutting issue?
It's one of those aspects in relation to how we can manage and make sure we're kind of accommodating getting through it. Yeah, unfortunately, just as I do, where that tends to occur and what tends to happen with those programs when we talk about them.
Okay. We have no other questions. Anybody out there? We will adjourn for the evening.
Well, gentlemen, go careful. I already.